the Lee Pro Auto Disc Powder Measure right now on Pirate Firearms and Reloading. Hi folks, so today I'm talking about the Lee Pro Auto Disc Powder Measure. So this I'm going to load today is 44 Magnum. What this is a powder dispenser that sits on top of a turret press. In my case it happened to come with the turret kit, and it sits on top of the Lee powder through expanding dies that you get in their pistol die sets. You can also buy a rifle set, but you will need to upgrade to a double disc system, which I'll show you later on. So it simply screws into the top of the powder through expanding die, and this load I'm going to do today, this is the first time I've run it through the Lee Auto Disc system. Previously I've done it on the Charge Master and dropped it in via a funnel. So you can see in the background on my screen here I've got the load, and I'm going to use Hodgdon little gun today. So please don't use this powder load yourself until you've tested it in your own firearm. Stick to reloading data. Because this load works for me, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So I'm going to take the Lee manual, and it happens because this is a Lee product, they actually give you a cool little table which tells you volume versus grains of most of the common powders. So when I find the right page, you can see this table here, and it talks about the capacity of the disc. Remember, here we're loading by volume, not by weight. Now I've highlighted Hodgdon little gun to make my life easier, and as you can see 20.1 grains is listed here, which makes my life even easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the 1.36 disc by volume, and that should equate to 20.1 grains of Hodgdon little gun. So now what I need to do is go to the discs. By the way, this unit comes with 4 discs. Each disc has 8 different slots, and they all have a different volume. So these are the discs here. Now I have the double disc kit, so I have twice as many. But long story short, this is one of the discs here. And as you can see, they're all labeled, and each hole or slot in the disc is a slightly different size corresponding to a different volume. Here's one of the real small ones, and they do stack nicely together, and that comes into play with the double disc kit, which I'll show you a bit later on. So there's the 1.36 I'm looking for. So inside that auto disc powder measure, I have to make it line up with this particular slot. Okay, so as you can see, my threads and my screws are sticking out slightly further, and this is where the double disc kit comes into play. They give you extra sidewalls and longer screws in order to fit 2 discs stacked on top like this. Now it's important to remember, if you do use the double disc kit, you must always put the larger holes on the bottom, otherwise you're going to create a powder shelf, and when the powder drops in it will be fine, but when you come to dispense it, not all the powder will drop out, it'll be sitting on a shelf. And that's why it's very important that you put the smaller slot on the top and the bigger one on the bottom. So we're just using the single disc today because it's a pistol round. So I'm going to undo these brass thumb screws. Just like that, loosen up, lift up the powder measure, and I should just be able to lift out the disc when it plays ball. So there's the disc. Now, as you can see there's the 1.36 corresponding to that particular hole. So I'm going to make sure that's the one that sits underneath the powder hopper. Lift the hopper assembly up, slide it into place. Just like that. And then tighten the brass thumb screws back up. Now I'm going to switch the dispenser into the off position, but as you can see there, the whole hopper moves and allows you to turn it on or off. So the other important thing to test this, I'm going to have to dispense the powder. Now it only dispenses when a case enters the case expanding die. So this is where a spent primer is going to come in handy. So I'm going to install the priming arm, put the shell holder back into place, and make sure it's working. Now if you are interested in that handle that you see in the picture or the little ramp, they're both made by Inline Fabrication. I have separate videos for those. So there's my spent primer. You can tell by all the dirty carbon on the bottom of it, and obviously the firing pin mark in it. So I'm going to raise it up into the resizing die, just as you normally would. Place the spent primer on the shell holder and install it just like you would a new primer. And basically that's just going to stop the powder falling out when I dispense it through the press. So now I'm going to add the powder into the hopper. Now I've got approximately 60 rounds to load, so I'm going to fill it pretty close to the top. Obviously put the lid on and turn the powder hopper to the on position. Now the on and off position will come in handy later on when we have to change it, if we have to change it of course. Now, as you can see, the powder lifts up and the disc slides forward. Now we have powder in the case. Now this first one's not going to be 100%, mainly because we haven't done a full rotation. Obviously that full rotation provides a small amount of vibration. Now what I'm going to do, once I've done that, is I'm going to come over here to the Charge Master, and I'm just going to use the Charge Master as a scale today. So I've got my pan all set up and the unit calibrated, so I'm going to pour that powder in there, and it's 19.8 grains. So it's very close to the 20.1 I'm after. So I'm going to throw a couple more, and I'll probably find it will sort itself out after a couple of dispenses. Okay, so I'm going to run the press through all the stages just to mock actually loading a completed round. And then just as I get to the dispensing stage, I'm going to reinsert that test case with the fired projectile in it, dispense another load of powder, I may have to adjust the indexing of that control rod as well. So that one's a little low as well, so I'm probably going to give this one another go, run it around a few more times and see what happens. Right, and I'll dispense the powder and recheck it again. As you can see, I'm manually turning the turret. That tells me I now need to adjust the indexing rod. Okay, and that one's a little low too. So I'm going to keep going here. I'm going to skip forward so you guys don't get bored, and I'm going to go until it's basically dispensing plus or minus 0.1 of a grain. That's where I consider my tolerance in terms of pistol rounds. And yeah, if this was like a bench rest rifle or a precision rifle, I wouldn't consider that acceptable. I'd be using the Charge Master to dispense this. And the load that I'm using, that 20.1 grains, is pretty forgiving. So I'm happy if it's plus or minus 1 grain. See, that load's come a bit closer. So let's skip forward and we'll come back once it's dispensing the correct amount of powder. Okay, so I've got it all set up, ready to go now. I've gone back to the 1.36 disc. I played around with the double disc trying to get it a little bit closer, but in the end the 1.36 dropped as close as possible to the 20.1 grains. It was either producing 20 grains or 20.2 grains, or obviously in the middle 20.1. So that's satisfactory for the load that I'm going to do. Alright, so now I've got everything set up and dialed in, I'm just going to get started loading. So obviously we go up into the resizing die, drop a new primer onto the priming arm, push it down, seat the primer up into the auto disc to dispense the powder, place the projectile in place, seat the projectile, and then through the post size and the crimp. And of course the inline fabrication ramp and case ejector makes a huge difference to this process. As you can see, I'm already grabbing the next piece of brass, ready to drop into the unit long before it's even ejected the old one. While that's not necessary, it does make my life a whole lot better. So check out the full video on that. Same with the ergo handle. So as you can see here, I can develop quite a little bit of pace here. Now what I'm planning on doing is, while I'm getting used to this setup and making sure it is dropping the correct amount of powder, every 5 or 6 rounds I'm going to measure the powder with the Charge Master. As you can see over on the left hand side, it's still on, and that's just going to allow me to double check and make sure everything's going okay. Once I've loaded a few batches of ammo with this setup, I'll be a little bit more confident. But all in all, this is how you get the Lee Pro Auto Disc set up and how it operates. You just noticed there with my thumb I manually advanced the turret, so I'm just going to have to adjust the timing. As you can see, it's not quite lining up on me, so I'm going to go back, adjust that turret and get back to loading. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I release new videos every Friday, so hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on anything. See you in the next one.